I got engaged to Jonathan when I was 25, but just 3 months later, he suddenly disappeared. 5 years later, the police called to tell me they found Jonathan. He was on his way back. They asked me to go pick him up. As soon as I received the call, my heart, which had been asleep for 5 years, suddenly came alive again. 5 years ago, my fiancé had an accident. There had been no news since. Everyone said he might be gone. They advised me not to wait anymore. I didn't listen. I stubbornly waited alone for 5 years. Now, I finally waited for him to come back. The airport lobby was noisy. I was staring intently at exit 5, but all the passengers from the plane had left. I still hadn't seen a trace of Jonathan. Sophia, a voice came from behind. It sounded hoarse and deep, like sandpaper rubbing together. I turned around, and I froze on the spot. The person in front of me looked just like the 26-year-old Jonathan, wearing the same black clothes, same hairstyle, just a scar on the forehead. Jonathan, I just called out, and he hugged me tightly. Before long, I felt something wet on my neck. Sophia. Jonathan's voice was choked, calling my name over and over. I was crying and couldn't speak. On the way back, my friend was driving. There were tears in her eyes, but she still smiled and joked. "Isn't your hand sore? Stop hugging me already." Since the day we met, Jonathan has been sticking close to me. After getting in the car, he even linked arms with me. I also held his hand tightly, afraid he would leave again, because I reported it to the police back then. Jonathan needed to give a statement. We went to the police station again, when Officer Smith, who attended to me back then, brought Jonathan out. He nodded at me and said, "Your wish has been fulfilled. Now go live your life well." We rushed back to the Thompson house. The 2 sets of parents who received the news were already waiting at the door. The car had just stopped. Jonathan's parents rushed over. As soon as Jonathan got out of the car, he knelt on the ground. He cried, saying he was unfilial. He apologized to them. He made them worry for 5 years. He felt even more sorry for me. My parents' eyes were all red. My mom gently hugged me. She helped me wipe my tears. That meal was our first family reunion dinner together in 5 years. It's a pity the food was so good. Everyone was too busy crying. No one really touched their chopsticks. After the meal, I accompanied Jonathan back to his room to rest. He was completely exhausted. He fell asleep as soon as he lay down. I leaned against him. I was reluctant to fall asleep. No matter how I looked, I couldn't get enough of him. I gently traced his eyebrow scar and face with my hand. I could feel his warmth on my fingertips. Finally, I rested on his lips. "Sophia." He turned over. In a daze, he pulled me into his arms. His habitual sleep-talking and actions made the emotions I had finally suppressed surge back up. He used to do this all the time. As long as there was no one in his arms, he would instinctively look for me. If he couldn't hold me, he wouldn't sleep well. In this moment, I truly felt, my Jonathan has finally come back. Jonathan and I have known each other since childhood. We were classmates from kindergarten to high school. We were even desk mates. Jonathan has lived a life of privilege since he was young. But my mom said, I grew up eating the food he provided. He can't even eat properly himself. Yet he can feed me steadily. He would also coax me to sleep. Every day after school, he would pull me home. This pulling has lasted until we are 25. My grades have never been very good. Yet Jonathan's grades are particularly good. He turned down many friends' invitations to play basketball, just to give me free tutoring. His friends all call him Mr. Thompson, but he doesn't care at all. He calmly helped me organize my homework. He poured me some fruit juice. He looked determined not to give up until he got me into the top school. With Jonathan's persistent help, I barely passed and got into the top school. My dad was so happy he set off firecrackers to celebrate. My mom even wanted me to call Jonathan my godfather. Only Jonathan pretended to be particularly calm. Later I found out, this guy was desperately tutoring me. He just didn't want to be apart from me. He's really quite scheming. In high school, I still ranked at the bottom. My grades were so bad it was frustrating. One day while having dinner, a familiar voice suddenly came over the broadcast. Sophia from class 25 of the senior year. Did you hear that? The familiar exercise music gradually filled the entire campus. The boy's voice was clear and pleasant. It sounded like singing. It suddenly gave me the motivation to keep pushing forward. In high school, Jonathan worked hard to tutor me, but my college entrance exam results were still not ideal. I stayed in my home province. He went north to study medicine. We were far apart. He was busy with his studies. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, until someone confessed their feelings to me. Things began to change. After the start of my sophomore year, someone anonymously sent me breakfast every day. I bragged about this to Jonathan. I wanted to prove that I had good relationships. Later on, a boy from the same department suddenly confessed to me. He held a bouquet of red roses. Classmates around us were cheering. I stood inside a heart shape made of candles. He blushed and stammered his confession, although he was so nervous that he couldn't speak clearly. But I could feel his sincerity. He handed me the roses. I didn't want him to be embarrassed in front of so many people. After all, the scene was already set. I was just about to reach out to take the flower. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of Jonathan in the crowd. He was dressed all in black, bent over, gasping for breath, as if he had just run over. His face looked particularly bad. At the moment I saw him, I felt inexplicably guilty. The hand I had reached out quickly retracted. What was originally a nod of agreement turned into a refusal. When I returned to the hotel at night, as soon as Jonathan walked in, he grabbed my wrist tightly. Then he held me tightly. Well, I'm out there fighting hard for our future, and you are messing around behind my back. That's really too much. Who is messing around? I haven't finished my words. Jonathan hugged me again. He said angrily, "Don't play dumb. I've liked you for so many years. Anyone can see that. It's you, idiot." Jonathan truly lives up to being a science major, solving problems quickly and accurately. He's just as efficient with other tasks. We quickly got together. He even made plans for our future. I'll get engaged right after graduation. We'll marry after he graduates. After marriage, he'll earn a living for the family. I can live well without working. He has that ability. I leaned in his arms. I asked softly, "Do I not deserve you? Do you really want to marry me?" Jonathan looked down at his hand on his belly. "What do you think?" I will never let Jonathan know. The kind person who delivered breakfast was actually me. Unless special measures are taken, how could he be so obedient? I was with Jonathan in my sophomore year. We dated for 2 years, although we didn't have many chances to meet. Whenever Jonathan had free time, he would come find me, even if he could only stay for one night. No matter how tired he was willing. In my memory, Jonathan has always been very disciplined, rarely shows emotions, but the one who hugged me at the train station and wouldn't let go was him. On the day of graduation after 2 years of long-distance relationship, Jonathan couldn't make it due to last-minute matters. I was both angry and helpless. I took my graduation photos listlessly, but just as we finished taking the group photo, Jonathan, dressed in a suit, was holding a bouquet of jasmine flowers. He was walking towards me from afar. Jonathan looks particularly handsome. In a suit, he looked even more stunning. When he knelt on one knee, I was so surprised that I gasped. He said, "Sophia, I have been part of your life since you were 5. You always say you can't live without me, but that's not true. It's me, Jonathan, who can't live without you. So, will you let me accompany you for the rest of your life? I promise to make your future days as sweet as honey. Sophia, will you marry me?" I don't know what expression I had at that moment, but my mom said my eyes squinted into slits when I smiled. I nodded vigorously without even thinking. I quickly held Jonathan's hand to put on the ring. I was afraid he might suddenly change his mind. Jonathan said he would propose when I graduated from my senior year, but I didn't expect that on my graduation day, he came with his parents to propose. I thought he was too anxious. He sighed. He said he had been preparing for over a year. He was just afraid it would be too late. Our engagement ceremony was arranged at the kindergarten in our community. He said it's because this is where we started. That kindergarten has long been closed. Jonathan called his friends for help. They worked for several days to set everything up. The old walls were painted anew. The broken slide was replaced with a brand new one. The walls were filled with our photos. The small dining table was set with snacks and toys. The stage was covered with carpet. It was piled high with fresh flowers. At the entrance stood cartoon cutouts of the two of us. All my friends have arrived. Blessings keep ringing in my ears. Someone joked about having twins in 3 years. I felt my ears burning. Jonathan nodded seriously and said he would work hard. We played until after 10 o'clock after the ceremony. I was a bit tipsy. Standing at the kindergarten gate, it felt like I was back on the day I turned 5 and started school. After sending off his friends, Jonathan walked over quickly. As usual, he held my hand and said, "Let's go home." Under the moonlight, our shadows stretched long, slowly overlapping together. I thought we would always be like this, meeting at dusk, watching the moon climb to the treetops, but I never expected that day would be the last time I saw Jonathan. I woke up suddenly from a dream. I was gasping for breath. My whole body trembled uncontrollably. I turned and saw Jonathan sleeping soundly beside me. Only then did I gradually calm down. I burrowed into his arms with all my strength, snuggling up to him for warmth. The dream was so real that he went abroad for work, and then he went missing, disappeared. After the engagement, Jonathan threw himself into studying as soon as he returned to school. He wanted to graduate early and marry me, but when he told me he would go abroad to assist his mentor for half a year, I didn't want him to go from the bottom of my heart. But when he mentioned it was a doctor's sacred duty, I relented. My Jonathan has a kind heart. Healing the sick and saving lives is his lifelong ideal. How could I bear to stop him? After Jonathan arrived, he reported that he was safe. Later, due to the time difference and poor signal, we often lost contact. But when I hadn't heard from him for an entire month, I realized he was missing. 2 months after Jonathan went missing, I went to the places he used to stay. I searched in that desolate place for 10 days and nights, but I could never find my beloved. I don't remember how I got back. All I remember is the tears, the cries, and the endless darkness. It feels like the sky has collapsed. When Jonathan woke me up, it was already noon. I haven't slept so soundly in a long time. He looks very energetic. After we eat, we'll go to the hospital. That's when I noticed he had many scars on him. He spoke lightly about his experiences after going missing. It turns out he wasn't actually missing. He was taken away by someone. Fortunately, he is a doctor. This identity saved him. He was forced to be a doctor for 5 years. During those 5 years, he endured silently. He secretly memorized the routes. He escaped with all his might. He spoke about it lightly, but I understand. Those pains and hardships are beyond what ordinary people can imagine. The medical report says he has been chronically undernourished. He has also been injured. His right leg cannot bend now. The scar on his forehead is too deep. It will never go away. Fortunately, there's nothing serious. After returning home, former classmates and friends all came to see him. Everyone was holding flowers. When they saw Jonathan, they all had red eyes. I stood by the side. I didn't understand why they all patted my shoulder. After sending off the friends, Jonathan didn't take me home. Instead, we went to the kindergarten behind the community. The kindergarten in front of us was already dilapidated. He held my hand and stood at the door. Memories from the past flooded my mind. When I was young, I always found you annoying. But when I saw you cry, I felt heartbroken. I thought it would be fine once we separated. I didn't expect that the one who couldn't hold on first was me. We promised to be together for a lifetime. I'm sorry, Sophia. I broke my promise for 5 years. The man slowly knelt on one knee in front of me. He took out a ring from his pocket. The ring had a purple gem embedded in the center. It sparkled. Before leaving, I have planned all the wedding arrangements. I booked the hotel. I selected the venue. I found the host. I even picked out your wedding dress. It's just that I can't make up my mind about the ring. Jonathan looked up, his eyes full of smiles, until he saw this piece of tourmaline. It represents a happy love, just like us. Sophia, do you still want to marry Jonathan? I nodded without hesitation. Just like before, I have always been willing. Later, I asked him why he wanted a second marriage. After all, I had already agreed long ago. Jonathan replied with a smile. He said I promised the 24-year-old him, but the 24-year-old Jonathan couldn't keep his promise. This time, he definitely won't break his word. The third day after Jonathan returned was the anniversary of the teacher's death. We went to the cemetery with many classmates. The rain was pouring heavily. The rain is pouring heavily. Jonathan is kneeling on the ground and refusing to get up. I stand beside him. The pain of losing a loved one. I understand more than Jonathan does. After Jonathan went missing, a package was sent from abroad. Inside were 2 sets of clothes he wore and the books he read. Those items have been on my bed in the bedroom for year after year. His family wanted to set up a ceremonial grave for Jonathan. I have always disagreed. But 2 years after he went missing, the ceremonial grave was still established. He didn't like to take photos. There aren't many pictures of him at home. Only 2 sets taken when we got engaged. In the photos, he looks handsome, with a smile in his eyes, holding my hand, with a look of contentment. But such good photos ended up being placed on his tombstone. No one noticed me crying my heart out in front of Jonathan's ceremonial grave. No one knows I once wanted to leave with him, right there in front of his grave, holding his most treasured scalpel. After coming back from the cemetery, we went to the wedding house. This house was prepared by Jonathan before the engagement. It's located right across from the 6th hospital. It's only 2 streets away from where we used to live. He said this location is convenient for me to go back to my parents' house for meals. It's also convenient for him to come home early from work, to live a life with a home and me. About the decoration, we had planned it a long time ago. Natural wood-colored flooring, wooden sofa, light yellow curtains, creamy white wallpaper, and a super large wardrobe. This was supposed to be a warm home, but it has been left vacant and covered in dust for 5 years. When the key turned and the door opened, a thick layer of dust rushed towards us. Jonathan quickly covered my mouth and nose, pulling me back outside the door. Sophia, give me 2 months. I will definitely tidy up this home to your satisfaction. I smiled and told him, then you'd better hurry up. Otherwise, I won't marry you. After that day, Jonathan has started decorating our wedding house as we discussed. We are all busy preparing for the wedding. Except for choosing the wedding dress and suit, which I have to do myself. Jonathan has quietly taken care of everything else. He hasn't told me a single thing. He said he wanted to keep it a secret. He wants to surprise me on the wedding day. Look at how happy he is. I didn't spoil the surprise. Actually, back when he was missing years ago, I looked through his computer. I found a file called Promise. Only after opening it did I realize it was his wedding plan. The wedding is to be held in a small church in the countryside. I used to joke about it. Whoever gives me a church wedding, I will marry them. Never thought he would remember that until now. The hotel is booked at Maple Leaf Hotel. I love eating the pork knuckle there. The wedding will be decorated with jasmine flowers. Because the first flowers Jonathan gave me were jasmine, he has arranged everything for the dress, the officiant, and the flowers. He has even prepared the songs to be sung at the wedding. Everything is all set. He worked on this plan for 25 years. It was only completed when he turned 25. It turns out he did it to marry me. He prepared for so long. I used to cry a lot when I saw these plans. Now I only feel happiness is coming. Maybe happiness has already arrived. The day before trying on the wedding dress, I was so excited that I couldn't sleep all night. I only fell asleep after taking 2 sleeping pills. When I woke up, I actually felt more exhausted. What's worse is, Jonathan was missing again. I searched everywhere in the house and the wedding room but couldn't find him. Friends and family all helped look for him. We searched until evening. Then I saw Jonathan getting out of a taxi. The sudden rush of feelings made me act impulsively. Without thinking, I ran over and hugged him tightly. Jonathan was obviously startled by me. He fumbled and hugged me back. He whispered, "Don't be afraid, Sophia. I just went to the church. It's too far over there. The phone is out of battery. Can't get a ride again." I didn't expect to be delayed this late. I'm sorry. I've worried you again. It's not important that I couldn't try on the dress. It's better that he returns safely than anything else. I still couldn't sleep that night, but this time I didn't take sleeping pills. When I woke up the next day, Jonathan was already at my house. He was playing chess with my dad. When he saw me get up, he smiled and shook the thermos next to him. Ate treasure porridge from Tianping Road. It's still warm. Jonathan fed me the porridge spoon by spoon. My dad couldn't stand it anymore. Jonathan, don't spoil her too much. This girl has become surprisingly lazy. Jonathan didn't stop what he was doing. Go ahead. It's nothing, Uncle. I've already fed her well. I smiled proudly at my dad. Secretly helped Jonathan win against him, and even stole his knight. My dad angrily said I was being disloyal. The house suddenly became lively, but I've been looking forward to this life for 5 years. After dinner, Jonathan and I went to the tailor shop for custom suits. This old street is filled with traditional craftsmen. The craftsmanship for making kipeos is especially good. I chose a bright red qipao. He picked a black Xiangshan suit. We looked particularly well matched together. On the way back, we passed by the high school. The school still looks the same. The phrase "Pursue Excellency" is still prominently displayed at the school gate. We happened to catch the end of classes. A group of energetic teenagers rode out on their bicycles. Some rode a bit slower, because they had shy girls sitting on the back seats. Seeing this scene, I couldn't help but look at Jonathan. Coincidentally, he was looking at me too. When our eyes met, we both smiled, realizing this was just like us back in the day. My family and Jonathan's family live one above the other. Because he didn't teach me how to ride a bike back then, out of a sense of responsibility, he took on the task of picking me up for a full 6 years, from middle school to high school. Every morning, I would sit sleepily on the back seat of Jonathan's bike. He carried both our backpacks, and had to use one hand to support me, afraid I would fall off. After evening study at 9 o'clock, I would excitedly shout from the back seat, "I want to eat hot and sour noodles, and add a grilled sausage." Jonathan shouted, "I want to drink milk tea." His expensive mountain bike. Every day, the handlebars were either loaded with steamed buns and fried dough sticks, or with rice noodles and hot and sour noodles. Sometimes there would even be a few portions of stinky tofu hanging there. We moved in sync with the crowd towards the snack street. Spicy noodles, fried skewers, ice cream. It made my eyes dazzle. Jonathan held my hand tightly, afraid I would get lost. Before I could speak, he was already standing in front of the hot and spicy soup stall. He stood out especially among the group of students. "Boss, 1 serving of spicy hot pot. Make it extra spicy with more chili. Add more vegetables. And another bottle of soy milk." He turned his head to look at me. "I'll buy you your favorite chicken feet when we go in later. Also grab some cream puffs. Do you want anything else?" I shook my head. 5 years have passed. I don't even remember what I like to eat anymore, but he remembers my tastes very well. We came out of the snack street. We went to watch a movie. Shinting's performance made me laugh until my stomach hurt. On the way home, he carried me on his back. I wrapped my arms around his neck, imitating the funny scenes from the movie. We laughed so hard we almost fell over. Sometimes, I squeezed him so tight he could barely stand. He bent down and lifted me up a bit, holding my legs tightly. I heard him laughing too. His voice was low, but it was exceptionally pleasant to hear. "Jonathan, it doesn't feel like we're preparing for a wedding. It feels more like we're dating." The day the wedding dress was delivered, we started taking wedding photos. All the clothes are our own, including the wedding dress. This wedding dress was ordered by Jonathan 5 years ago. It has an off-the-shoulder design, with a fluffy princess skirt. It's adorned with crystals all over. It cost him half a year's salary. I laughed at him for choosing a princess dress as a big man, but he wasn't angry. He smiled and touched my hair, saying, "Because Sophia is my princess." The day the wedding dress was delivered, it happened to be the day Jonathan went missing. That unopened wedding dress has hung in my closet for 5 years. I have never worn it. I haven't even tried it on. It's not that I don't want to wear it, but I only wanted to wear it for him. Although the style of the wedding dress is outdated, Jonathan said he would get me a new one, but I didn't agree. If it weren't for this wedding dress, I might have lost even the thought of it. He won't last until he comes back. Is it beautiful? It's my first time wearing a wedding dress. I'm a bit nervous. Jonathan has been staring at me. He nodded blankly. It took him a while to respond. It's pretty. He looks really cute like this. We didn't go to a studio for our wedding photos like most people. Instead, we chose a few meaningful locations. The first location was the kindergarten. We took photos in front of the carousel, swing, and small benches. Jonathan said these photos would be used at the wedding. The later photos need to be developed and enlarged. They'll be hung in the living room of our wedding house. He even reserved the spots for them. The second shooting location was the high school. We didn't go inside the school. We were afraid it would disturb the students' studies. We took 2 photos at the school gate. The first one was us in school uniforms sitting on a bicycle. The second one was us standing in the sunlight in suits and the wedding dress. Although we were very careful, but there were still students who heard the news and ran over to see the excitement. Jonathan took out the wedding candies he had prepared in advance to share with everyone. The children's innocent and cheerful faces expressed the most sincere blessings. Wishing you both a long and happy life together, forever happy. At the moment the shutter was pressed, the wedding dress and school uniform seemed to have completed a solemn handover. We were exhausted after taking the wedding photos. We just collapsed on the park bench. I scrolled through the selfies on my phone. Strangely, every photo was overexposed. I couldn't see Jonathan's face at all. It felt like all that effort was in vain. Jonathan publicly took off my high heels. Without caring about anyone around, he helped me rub my legs. Princess, you've worked hard. Let's have some braised pig trotters for dinner to replenish your energy. I leaned against his leg, comfortably enjoying the evening breeze. He suddenly made me laugh. All the fatigue just vanished. Being with him, happiness is that easy. On the way back, there are many fortune-telling stalls by the roadside. I casually glanced at one. I saw someone interpreting a fortune. This suddenly reminded me of something from the past. When Jonathan was born, his parents had someone read his fortune. The fortune said, "A picturesque mountain faces the clear river. Family reunion, everything comes in pairs." Who would have thought they would suddenly part ways, leaving only an empty house silently facing the candlelight? The old monk who read fortunes only said 12 words. Good fortune falls through. Husband and wife separated. A hasty ending. Jonathan's parents quickly added the character Anto his name, hoping for him to live safely throughout his life. Jonathan indeed grew up smoothly to the age of 25. His family thought that fortune was inaccurate. Who knew he suddenly lost all contact? Thinking of this, I held Jonathan's hand tighter. Fortunately, he came back safe and sound, not seeking great wealth or nobility, as long as one lives well, like flowers that bloom and never wilt. The wedding is set for 2 months later. It's just in time for Jonathan's birthday. That's 1 month before the wedding. Jonathan has found a job. He works at the 6th hospital. It's very close to both his parents' house and our wedding apartment. Everything is going according to our plan from 5 years ago. Jonathan is especially busy after starting work. It's often hard to reach him all day, but I often go to bring him lunch and pick him up after work. His colleagues at the office are quite envious of him. Every time, Jonathan proudly hugs me. He says everyone must come when we get married. Half a month before the wedding, the house renovations are finished. It was my first time entering the new house. Jonathan specially bought fresh flowers. He said to me, "Welcome home, hostess. Welcome home." Light yellow curtains, wooden floors, large floor-to-ceiling windows. The balcony is filled with green plants. Those things I drew on paper have now all become real. I joyfully embraced Jonathan. "Jonathan, we have a home now." Jonathan carried me to the balcony. Suddenly, I heard a meow. I was stunned for a moment. I turned my head and looked at Jonathan in surprise. Jonathan smiled at me and nodded, saying, "Yes, you now have a cat." I have loved cats since I was little, but my mom is allergic to cat hair. We never had one at home. Before marriage, Jonathan promised to get me a cat after we got married. This time he didn't mention it. I thought he had forgotten. It turns out he still remembered. I jumped off Jonathan immediately. I hurried over to the cat bed. This little cat is so tiny, and it's a beautiful calico cat. I quickly covered my mouth to stifle a sound. My eyes were filled with love. I pulled the kitten into my arms. It was fragrant and soft. It melted my heart instantly. I named the kitten Spicy Hot Pot, because those are my two favorite things. Jonathan, who was cooking in the kitchen, heard the reason for the name. He protested while holding the spatula. "Shouldn't your favorite be me?" He spoke fiercely, but he was wearing a pink apron. It didn't have any intimidation at all. "All right, dear, don't argue with the cat." Jonathan crossed his arms and sulked. He put on a stance that he wouldn't give up until he was appeased. Seeing the cola chicken wings in the pot were almost burnt, I quickly hugged him and acted cute. "You are my sweetheart. No one can replace you. Even if we have children in the future, they can't compare to you." Jonathan gently kissed me. He returned to the kitchen with satisfaction. The spatula was almost sparking. Like a child, Jonathan is really good at cooking. When we were kids, our parents were busy with work. He could have gone to eat at Grandma's house, but it's to keep me company. He learned to cook at such a young age. He can make braised lion's head, steamed sea bass, and Christian carp soup. But my favorite is his fish-flavored shredded pork, because only he puts my favorite strips of bamboo shoots in it. Tonight, the dining table is filled with my favorite sweet and sour pork ribs and fish-flavored shredded pork. I can't bear to put down the little kitten in my arms. Jonathan pretended to be angry and said, "Go wash your hands. Otherwise, put the kitten away." I quickly raised my hands to show I was surrendering. Jonathan took me to the bathroom. Only then did I notice there was a large bathtub inside. The shelf next to it was filled with the skincare products I usually use. While helping me wash my hands, he said, "This is your favorite massage bathtub. All the skincare products next to it are the ones you often use." Jonathan really understands me. The ribs he made are just to my taste. With one bite, the taste buds that had been dormant for years were awakened. I ate 2 big bowls. Jonathan is washing the dishes in the kitchen. I'm playing with the cat on the sofa. After the meal, we went downstairs together to walk the cat. When we came back, no one mentioned the idea of him leaving. He went to take a shower first. I'm washing up in the bedroom. The makeup remover and skincare products are all brand new, and they are my usual brand. The towel, slippers, and toothbrush are all couple-themed. The more I think about it, the more I feel that this was all planned by him in advance. Jonathan finished his shower. He is lying on the bed reading, but he hasn't turned the page in a long time. He saw me come in. He immediately put down the book and opened his arms. I laughed and jumped into his arms. Suddenly, we heard a noise. Someone is knocking on the door. I said, "Wait a moment. It sounds like someone is scratching the door." Jonathan's expression darkened. He was clearly unhappy about being interrupted. "You heard it wrong. That's all I have to say." He grabbed me. All the things I wanted to say were cut off by him. "This bathtub has a massage function. I really like it. It relieves my sore back." I said to Jonathan, "This massage bathtub is really nice. To make me marry you, you really are willing to spend money." Jonathan hugged me and said with a big smile, "That's right, to marry you. I've spent my entire fortune. You can't back out now." I almost laughed out loud. Only foolish people regret. 1 week before the wedding, I scheduled a makeup trial with the artist. I purposely didn't let Jonathan know. I wanted to give him a surprise. 3 days before the wedding, my parents want me to stay home and prepare for the wedding. Jonathan is busy preparing the new house and wedding venue. He doesn't have time to see me. There's no one to keep me company. I can't sleep again. My mom prepared a lot of medication for me. She said it would help me sleep well, to make sure I'm in the best condition on the wedding day. I obediently took the medicine. As a result, I felt groggy all day. Later, I secretly poured the medicine out. The day before the wedding, friends came to help me decorate the new house. They quietly showed me pictures of the wedding venue. The red carpet stretched from the entrance all the way into the church. The ground was scattered with jasmine flowers. There were many candles lit inside the church. Each seat was tied with a bouquet of jasmine flowers. It looked both sacred and warm. This is the wedding I wanted. Looking at the photos, I feel like I'm already standing at the wedding venue. I'm looking at Jonathan at the end of the red carpet waiting for me. My dad will hand my hand over to this person I love the most. We will accept everyone's blessings together and make a vow to be together forever. At the hotel, everyone has organized this wedding for us, which should have taken place 5 years ago. We toast to our guests table by table, thanking them for their blessings. After the wedding, we will return to our little home with everyone's blessings and start a happy life. Thinking about tomorrow, I'm so excited that I can't sleep. To stay in good shape, this time I obediently took my medicine. As a result, I slept until 10 in the morning. Seeing the clock's hands pointing to 10 o'clock, I jumped out of bed suddenly. I shouted, "Mom, I'm late. Has the makeup artist arrived? Hurry, call her in. I'm in a rush." I quickly changed my clothes and went to wash up. "Mom, why didn't you call me?" Just as I complained, I realized something was wrong. The house was eerily quiet. There wasn't a single person around. The red wedding decorations and balloons in the house were gone. There was no atmosphere of celebration at all. I pushed open the door. Right across is Jonathan's house. I was just about to ask him what happened. As soon as I entered, I smelled the scent of burning paper and bamboo. Someone was crying. I hurried into the living room. I saw the parents from both families collapsed on the floor. They were crying uncontrollably. Jonathan's mom was crying the hardest. She could barely catch her breath. In the center of the table was a black and white photo of Jonathan. 3 incense sticks were lit in front of it. His favorite fruits and meals were placed there. Jonathan's mom cried out heart-wrenchingly, "Oh, my son, how could you leave your mother behind?" I stepped back slowly. No way. Jonathan clearly came back safely. He even proposed to me in kindergarten. We were supposed to get married today. The wedding was set at a church in the countryside. He promised to come and marry me today. Jonathan must have overslept and is late. He's afraid I would get angry. "So you tricked me, isn't that right?" I pushed open Jonathan's bedroom door. No one was inside. "That's right. He's at the wedding house." I hurriedly ran downstairs. I heard someone behind me chasing and calling my name. I didn't dare to look back. I ran even faster. I arrived at the Thompsons' house. I rushed up to the 3rd floor. I fished out the key from under the carpet and opened the door, but the empty shell of a house in front of me made my legs go weak. I collapsed directly onto the floor. Where has my home gone? I must have taken a wrong turn. This is not my home. There is no Jonathan here. I was about to go downstairs. Suddenly, my parents hugged me tightly. I cried and struggled. I begged them to let go. "I want to find Jonathan," Mom cried out with a trembling voice. "Sophia, Jonathan is really gone. He only has this ring left. It's now on your hand." I lowered my head to look at the ring. Suddenly, I thought of the call I received that day. They wanted me to go pick it up. Not the living Jonathan, but a box of ashes. I'm a friend of Sophia. After Jonathan went missing, Sophia was devastated. She attempted to take her own life. She made a suicide attempt. Her body and mind were both broken. She often had hallucinations. She was completely living in her own world. After 2 years of medication treatment, she had just started to improve. When she received the call from the police said they found Jonathan. They asked us to go to the airport to pick up the ashes. When I heard the news, the Thompsons' parents fainted and had to be taken to the hospital. But Sophia didn't cry. She just stayed up all night, unable to sleep. When Jonathan's urn was handed over, she stared blankly at it. There was no sadness in her eyes, only joy at the long-awaited reunion. I saw her holding the urn, laughing and crying, constantly calling out Jonathan. I understand. Sophia is starting to hallucinate again. On the way to the police station, she tightly holds onto the urn. A smile long unseen appeared on her face. After receiving the autopsy report, the police told me Jonathan suffered extremely brutal abuse. His body was covered in bruises, and the wound on his forehead was fatal. It penetrated directly to the bone, resulting in his immediate death. Besides the ashes, we also found his only keepsake, a ring, in his clothes. While the police were taking notes, Sophia quietly said to me, "Jonathan hasn't changed much in 5 years. He just has an extra scar on his forehead. His clothes and hairstyle are the same as before." Still so handsome. I forced myself to hold back my tears. Sophia hasn't seen Jonathan in 5 years. She can't even imagine what he looks like now. The Jonathan in her memories, still stuck in the way things were 5 years ago, only with an additional scar on her forehead. Back home, sure enough, there was another bout of crying. The morning hall at home has been set up, according to our local customs. His favorite dishes should be placed on the spirit table. Jonathan's mother prepared a large spread of food. Jonathan's body is temporarily placed in his bedroom. It was Sophia who personally carried him in. After the outside matters are taken care of, I quietly went in to take a look. Sophia hadn't slept for several days. At that moment, she was holding Jonathan, soundly asleep on the bed. The elders from both families are handling the funeral arrangements. All of Jonathan's friends have arrived. One by one, they patted Sophia on the shoulder, trying to comfort her and encourage her to pull herself together. But at that time, Sophia seemed to be living in a dream of loss and recovery. She simply did not understand what had happened. She smiled at Jonathan's photo. I quietly followed her from behind, watching her go to their childhood kindergarten. I watched her talking to the air all by herself from a distance. She always had a smile on her face. In the end, she put the ring on her finger. After returning home, Sophia happily told me Jonathan proposed to her. I suddenly understood why she went to the kindergarten, because that was where they got engaged back then. It was also there Jonathan vowed to marry only her in this lifetime. Sophia wore a purple tourmaline ring on her hand, representing perfect love. Unfortunately, Jonathan couldn't help her put it on himself. Jonathan was buried on the 3rd day. Sophia also went. She stood behind Jonathan's mother to comfort her, wiping her tears. Everyone thought she was okay. In fact, she was in worse condition. After returning from the cemetery, Sophia suddenly went to Thompson's house. That was her and Jonathan's marital home. She hadn't been there for 5 years since Jonathan went missing. I followed her. I was worried something might happen to her. It turned out she was just coughing from the dust when she opened the door. She even laughed and said, "Jonathan, I want natural wood floors, a wooden sofa, light yellow curtains, and cream-colored wallpaper, and a large wardrobe." I took her back home. I watched her finish her medication. The next day she was a bit more alert, but she couldn't see Jonathan anymore. This nearly drove her to collapse. She searched from morning till night. She only calmed down when the medication wore off and she could see Jonathan again. After that, Sophia went to the old street to order a qipao. She discussed colors and patterns seriously with the shop owner. She seemed very normal, except for the qipao. She also ordered a set of Zhongshan suits. After she finished the qipao, she went to the street she often visited during her student days. A person ate a lot of snacks, and also watched a movie. Returned home, Sophia took the wedding dress out of the box. She put on the wedding dress and stood in front of the mirror. She happily said to us, "Tomorrow I'm going to take wedding photos." Sophia's mother looked worried. I nodded at her, to reassure her not to worry. Since the last time she took the medicine, Sophia refuses to take any more medicine. We have no choice. We can only go along with her. The next day, she wore the wedding dress to kindergarten. She asked me to take her picture. Watching her embrace the air, trying hard to pose with a happy smile, I couldn't hold back my tears. She stayed at kindergarten for a long time, then went to the high school gate. There, she smiled even brighter. She also quietly reminded me not to speak loudly. Don't disturb the students inside. The younger students all think she's taking artistic photos. No one knows she's fulfilling a wish from 5 years ago. After taking the photos, Sophia suddenly started going to the entrance of the 6th hospital every noon, carrying a full thermos with her. In the afternoon, she would return with an empty lunch box. She said she wanted to bring lunch to Jonathan. In fact, she fed it all to stray cats. One day, Sophia suddenly called me, inviting me to visit their new home. She said Jonathan decorated the house beautifully. He even gifted her a little kitten. When I arrived, Sophia was standing in the undecorated house, holding a wild cat and smiling at me. She happily took my hand, leading me to see her and Jonathan's home. This massage bathtub was bought for me by Jonathan at quite a cost. Sophia pointed at the empty bathtub. I followed her cue and complimented it a bit. That day, she was especially happy. Tell me that she and Jonathan are getting married in the church. It's set for a week later on Jonathan's birthday. My heart sank. I felt that something was off. Quickly let Sophia's parents use traditional customs as an excuse. Convinced Sophia to go back home. After coming back, Sophia suddenly started taking her medicine on time, but the medication made her always drowsy. It seemed she discovered something. She started secretly pouring out the medicine. The day before Jonathan's birthday, I showed Sophia pictures of the church wedding. She was captivated by them. Excitedly holding my hand tightly, she said, "This is the wedding I want. But even without a church wedding, I still want to marry Jonathan." Poor Sophia has always dreamed of marrying Jonathan. That day, to coax her into taking her medicine, I told her that if she didn't rest well, she wouldn't look beautiful at the wedding the next day. Sophia obediently took her medicine. The medicine was supposed to let her sleep until noon. Once Jonathan finishes his business, everything will be fine. But I didn't expect that just going downstairs to pick up takeout would wake her up. Sophia woke up. She even ran to Jonathan's house. I heard Sophia's scream. I hurried upstairs. As a result, I ran right into her. Both of us fell down. She seemed to be feeling no pain. She got up and rushed outside. She saw her once warm home turned into an empty shell, and the person who made the promise was nowhere to be found. When Sophia came to her senses, she completely broke down. Sophia sat on the ground. She cried so hard she couldn't stand up. It was just a little bit away. I was so close to marrying Jonathan. I understand now.